Here we go. First Fridays. Thank you so much, everybody, for stopping by. This is our third installment of media relations during a disaster. This one specifically is going to focus on the duration of the event's response. Now, just as an introduction, in case we have new people here, and I certainly hope that we do, I would like to let you know that First Friday is held, yes, every first Friday of the month from 6 to 7 Hawaii time. And it's always going to be here on Teams. The reason for that is quite simply, we have Red Crossers from across the region that are looking to join. So I want to make sure that it's available to everyone. And also it makes the point of this whole thing far easier. It's to learn practical media training. First and foremost, that's what this has become, and that's what I want to make sure that all of you have. And it's also a chance to network with fellow communicators and other volunteers that you may come across in the waiting room, to be aware of projects that are going on in the communications department, and of course, to share and practice any ideas that you have when it comes to telling the Red Cross story. Okay, so on our agenda for this evening, we are in the opening right now. Welcome to that. We're going to start off with the scenario, set the stage as far as what the duration of the response is going to look like. My section is going to focus predominantly on media relations. So I'll be going over what to watch for, best practices, and then of course how that relates to traditional media and social care. Social care being social media. Then I'm going to hand things over to our guest speaker. Our Maui County Program Manager, Jenny Worth, is going to be talking to us. She has a wealth of field experience already, so I wanted to bring in an expert, and that's who we have. Then we'll pop back towards the end of the hour and allow for question and answers, any stories that you would like to share, experiences that we can all learn from. I invite you to pipe up then. And of course, throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, feel free to either raise your hand or to put it in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that as well. Okay, so here we are, part 3. Now, this is the entire disaster season campaign that we're working our way through. Started off in July, 3 or 5 days before the storm's initial impact, moved into the first 48 hours after landfall. Now we're going to talk about the duration of the response. This is certainly the longest section as far as the actual practicing of it goes. The details for this one, you'll notice, might actually be a little bit sparse compared to leading up to and those initial 48 hours. But this is going to be the critical one that takes up the most time on your calendar, essentially. Next month, October 7th, we are going to go over the wind down and the aftermath of a disaster response communications. Let's set the stage for this one. How things are panning out right now. Since we just went through those initial 48 hours, we're going to say that at this point, the brunt of the event has passed. And fortunately, your team is in position. Last month, as we heard from Marty Moran, those initial couple of days, everyone's running around and trying to figure out how things operate. So in that first, could be 2 days, could be 5 to 7 days. That is sometimes shaky ground, but everyone is working on it. This is when that really kicks into play. So let's say that we have everyone's team is in place. People have settled into the shelters, and the shock of the event is wearing off. This is a point where you start to go through the mental process of, is this the new normal? And then how do you relate to the new normal? And I'm speaking in terms of our clients specifically. Something to be aware of, the Red Cross is not the only organization that is responding to this, and that's something to always keep in mind on the periphery. We also have local news wanting constant updates. And you'll notice that the way that they have gone about asking us for information has changed. We'll be going into that. And then, of course, social media is being dominated by stories from the event and all forms of response, whether it's Red Cross, first responders, medical services, hospitals, fire, whatever it might be. Everything is being talked about constantly, and that means everything applies to us. So, to start off with, what is it that we are watching for? We need to prioritize responses because services will continue to evolve. Even though all of the pieces might be in place, of course, it is a disaster scenario. It is an emergency protocol. Gray skies mean that things can change quickly and without warning. So, what to be aware of? Learn what services are available where within the Red Cross. And that might be stuff to keep in mind. Are there actual medical volunteers, licensed medical volunteers at the shelter that you're at? Or if you are the PAO, know which shelters offer that. Another very popular question to come in is, are pets allowed? Some of the shelters, yes, some of them, no. It's a good thing to keep in mind. Find out what those are, and then constantly work on updates. The next part to remember is really that you are providing value to the viewer with this messaging. And I say viewer, but I really mean anybody who might be coming by our Facebook page, anyone who might see us on a news interview, whatever that might be. That's what we're trying to do, is provide value. So, and I know everybody's sick of me saying this every single time, but I've got to keep hammering it home. Verified information only. Is a shelter opening up? Great, because it was needed in a new area. You need to get the details on that. You need to make sure that people know what's available to them. Is a shelter closing down? It's been enough time, or you're in an area where it's like, you know what, our services are better directed somewhere else because everyone here is taken care of geographically. Great. Make sure that you keep people constantly apprised of that information. And the reason why I'm going to harp on this as far as verified information and constant updates is that misinformation is everywhere. I do not want to take a pessimistic look at this by any stretch. I just want everyone to realize that in this kind of a situation, it is often handled like a conversation, not a research paper. So everyone, from the media to clients to just people wanting to sound off on social media, will quite often speak or post before all of the details are known and confirmed. Nothing wrong with that, because that's how people talk, but it can create some serious misinformation. So constantly monitor the news, constantly monitor discussions. Clients and media, again, will post before all facts are known. So what you want to do is get out in front of any potential problem stories. And what this allows you to do is, and it ties into the last bullet point there, be critical of our response. Yes, we know what we're doing, and we want to make sure that we find every way that we can help people. And one of the ways that we do that is by essentially playing the devil's advocate to what we're providing. Find out, just move through the mind of one of our clients as far as the steps that they go through, what might they be frustrated by, what might they complain about, or simply want to have easier access to, quicker access to, all of that. Those are going to be kind of the holes in the dam that we start to need to plug. It also allows us to build a response in advance, because it is very important at these points in time to keep information flowing. Now, other parts, I'm going to backtrack a couple of bullet points here. Don't hesitate to refer questions to other appropriate organizations. There are times when people will say, I have food that I want to donate, but the Red Cross will not take the food. That's because we don't do that. We can't. It's a safety measure. People will say the same thing about clothes. People will say the same thing about blood. All of these things, those are not our purview. So again, this relates back to what are the other organizations that might be responding to this disaster, and make sure that people are pointed in the right direction. This is not us dodging responsibility. This is us getting to yes. You'll hear that phrase from time to time, especially during a disaster response, is that you want to facilitate people simply getting the help they need. And one of the ways that we might need to do that is by saying, that's someone else that you need to go to. Let me point you in the right direction. I also want to say this is something just to keep in mind at all points, especially if you're in a shelter. But of course, if you're the PAO as well, this is critical. Pay attention to clients who may have a story to tell and a willingness to tell it. And of course, I put here as appropriate. Obviously, we are not going to push these subjects. These are dark moments for people. We're not looking to exacerbate that in any way. What we do want to do is pay attention to those ones where it's like, I can't believe that, that you guys showed up. That, the fact that we now have food, whatever. If someone seems grateful, just engage them, because people want an ear, no matter what. People want someone to listen to them. And quite often, as many of you who have worked in response, everything from mental health to shelter lodging to simple snack distribution, you'll find that people just want to talk. It helps them process. And so that's one of the listening talents that we need to keep in mind is, does this person seem like they are good at telling a story and are willing to tell a story, and that they have a good one to share? Okay, those are some overall prioritization that I definitely want to make sure that we all know about. Now we're going to go into a few specifics: media and social care. We can divide this up into traditional media and social media. Starting off with traditional media, we have up until this point talked from a perspective of I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in really quickly here. I see something in the chat. Karen asking, what is a PAO? My apologies, I did not define that. Public Affairs Officer. Public Affairs Officer. It is often the title that is given to someone who works specifically in communications and media relations for a disaster response. Thank you. Great question. Okay. So as people cycle through, you're going to want to update your list of who is reliable to have an interview. So, as we spoke about in previous meetings, it's good to have a short list of people that you can call upon. Just knowing who your team is, you can really get a feel for who is going to be comfortable in front of a camera. So, as a PAO, again, as a public affairs officer who is overall directing interview requests, period, that is a good and essential list of information that you need to have and keep updated. It's also helpful when you're a shelter manager as well, because sometimes that's going to come in, that request of like, we have a television reporter and camera at the front door. This needs to happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as we all know, our first duty is to the client, not the reporter. So you, perhaps as a shelter manager, have about 17 things that you're all trying to do at the exact same time. But if you know of one of your volunteer staff, it's like, they're personable, they seem comfortable in talking to people, let's see if they're willing to be on camera. It is an excellent way just to have that tool in your box, and an excellent way to delegate necessary tasks. Now, the media is on a constant cycle, so their story is going to change. You'll notice that, and we had talked about this in previous meetings as well, up until this point, the media is very, very friendly. That doesn't necessarily change, but there is the potential for it to. And I mean friendly in the sense that they're looking to keep stories up that constantly say, how do we keep everyone safe? What is the information? That is considered, I consider it at least, friendly journalism, because they're working with you. There's no way that there's going to be a critique, because they simply want the information that you have. and you're going towards the same goal, making sure people are safe. However, like I said, the shock of this initial event wears off. And as anyone who's been through an adrenaline rushing situation can tell you, as high as the adrenaline can take you, there is also a crash afterwards. That can happen mentally as well, in the sense of, okay, well, we went through this thing. Now it feels like everyone is moving very slowly, and I want my stuff. You can't fault people for saying that. I'm certainly not criticizing them for it. It's a very natural reaction. So sometimes the media can take on a bit of that personality as well, and their story shifts. They're no longer in the keep everyone safe mode. They're, are we doing enough? And it becomes a little bit of a critique. That is fine, because, everyone needs to have their feet somewhat held to the fire, so long as it's being done in a way where it's like, let's get to yes. And again, that's going to be on you to kind of control that story. You want to shape the way that this is done. Now, this is not necessarily the case locally with the news, but be wary. There is definitely potential for this. So what we want to do is, once again, find a way to shape that story so that we are very much out there in front. I'm going to jump ahead here. You'll see this bullet point under social media messaging and care, but it's applicable to all forms of media. Use facts and transparency. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But the best way, and really the only defense that we are going to be able to truly rely on when we get those critical stories, are facts and transparency. Now, local media is what you're generally going to be dealing with. However, there will be a national influence as well, depending on the nature of the disaster. If that if that national media outlet reaches out, Good Morning America wants to talk to somebody. It could be anyone on the line along the lines of 60 Minutes, or I'm just spitballing, brainstorming, but whoever that might be, that is something to send to our 24/7 Red Cross media line. That is a group of people where that is their responsibility. They are on call and they handle national level media, because national level media operates in a way that's, I'm going to say, on a different level, but between you and me, kind of crazy at times too. So let's let other people that are trained to deal with crazy deal with crazy. The media line's phone number is there. We also have an email address that you can send things along, because quite often we will get emailed requests, especially out here in Hawaii. If the disaster that we're talking about is out here in Hawaii, let's say it is, and of course this is applicable for anyone in our region, national media isn't just going to immediately have somebody on site. That's not possible. So because of the remote nature of everything, yes, quite a few requests will bounce in via email as well. So that's a handy one to have. Again, when this recording goes out and when the slide deck is made available, you'll be able to have these. These are great to have in your phone, just saved and ready to go. Now we're going to look specifically at social media. Social care is what this is often shortened to. You're going to need to constantly look for any conversations about the Red Cross response. There are quite a few times where the entirety of your responsibility, or there is a person whose entire responsibility for the disaster response is just to roam Facebook and Twitter and other social media sites, just looking for the stories that are out there. Quite often it's people that, like, this is how they know to get in touch with something, an organization, whether it's a business or a nonprofit response group like us. This is the way they know how to do it and get the fastest response. Everything else, they are trained to sit through phone calls with, electronic switchboards that they just have to take forever to get through. No, social media is immediate. And so that's what the kind of response that they want. Do not get defensive. This is an absolute key thing. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I need to make sure that I say these and have this out there because it is very easy. I confess that this is something that, like, in an instantaneous moment of like, of course we're out there doing stuff. How dare you? That is obviously not the response that we need to give. It's taking that moment and using our training, and this is how we respond. Use those facts and those transparency. Someone is going to be out there and say, you know, you're not here in, let's say, Laie, and this is destroyed, and there is no one here from the Red Cross. There are a lot of reasons why that might be the case. It could be that we are, unfortunately, understaffed. It could be that we have simply not received any reports of this, and this is the first we're hearing of it. Facts and transparency are going to be absolutely key. Then you're going to use a little bit of that verbal jujitsu that I've spoken about before and how to shape the messaging. You want to turn that around. You want to say, thank you so much for letting us know about this. We are working our way through responding to everyone who's made the call. I appreciate you letting us know any details. If there is anything else that we know so that we know how to best direct our response, please reach out to me and start that conversation. Here is the big thing that is going to tie into this next bullet point as well. Your messaging should reflect a face-to-face response, kindness, patience, etc. This is absolutely key. The main thing that people want is an ear. Like I said earlier, they want someone to listen to them. Even if what they're saying is, I'm angry. They might not actually be all that upset. They just want to know that someone is listening to them. They've just been through an experience where, I mean, the definition of most of these disasters and emergency situations is that control is ripped away from them. This, in some small way, is how they exert control. So this is how we need to respond. Be kind, be patient, use those facts and transparencies, and turn that around so that, again, we can get to yes for the client. Now, with that, I'm going to say that there is certainly a wealth of information that we can go deeper into as far as direct media relations. There are classes that are designed entirely about that, but I wanted to spend this particular meeting getting some field experience discussion going. So I would like to turn things over now to our guest speaker, our Maui County Program Manager. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that she can take over. Jenny Worth, thank you so much. If you want to come off mute and take it away.
All right, aloha. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be at my first Friday. I'm sad I missed the previous. Let me know when you can see my slideshow.
Looks like we've got the split screen at the moment.
Uh-oh. Hold on. Oh, shucks. Hang on. It's trying. Hang tight, everybody. It's a new one. Never seen it do that before. Everybody, my apologies. Wow. I'm gonna put myself on mute for just a second.
No worries. In the meantime, does anybody have any questions or anything they would like to say regarding what we've talked about so far as in terms of media training? And you could just raise your hand. Karen.
How would we know if we have somebody who is knowledgeable Do they have some kind of training from Red Cross to be the
No,
PAO?
yes, yes. Knowledge of any communications aspect and media relations. There are people who are designated that in the disaster response. The same way that there is, food distribution, caseworkers, there are PAO positions that people get called up for. Now, those classes that I mentioned where you can go into a lot greater detail, if you would like to step up and be one of those PAOs, I'll set you up with the training. Please reach out to me after the meeting today, and I can make sure that that happens. Otherwise, really, it's just say you're, again, you're working in the shelter, managing whatever it is that you might be doing. Just knowing who is affable, friendly, easy, and easygoing and can talk to people. That's what's going to be critical as far as knowledgeable and getting on camera, getting on microphone, anything along those lines. Anyone else that you should specifically reach out to, and thank you for bringing this up, the IAP that gets sent out every day. If you do not receive one of those, ask your manager. They will be able to provide this information. There is a list of people, a directory of everyone involved in key positions for the disaster response, including someone whose position it is completely designated working on communications and media relations. Okay, it looks like, yes, we've got the slide up.
All right, does that look great for everyone?
Looks good.
Okay, super. So was very excited at the suggestion of presenting on communications and the flow of information throughout a disaster response. And I see what your last two meetings were about, and we might touch on a little bit of what you've discussed before, but just briefly. So our role with Red Cross is to provide life-sustaining services to survivors of every disaster, large and small, right? I see some of the names on here. I know a lot of you have a lot of experience with Red Cross, so I don't want to spend too much time. But there are differences between small regional operations, level 1, level 2, and then larger level 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 operations, right? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the differences in our communications. So let's look at, a home fire and just deploying a disaster action team, right? The first communication that would goes out through our C respond, right? And everyone's notified, regional staff and volunteers who deploy. So Matthew receives notification right when that call comes in. And so then, of course, we dispatch the team, initiate contact with the family, conduct client intake, offer advocacy, and then we come down to conduct public affairs, right? So when we're communicating through Red Cross and to the public, those communications are under our organizational authority and are commensurate with our incident complexity, right? Depends on how complex the situation is. So communication is maintained throughout the chain of command that Red Cross facilitates under, from the public relations volunteer or the disaster program manager to the regional communications director. So we're maintaining throughout, but in this instance, when we're deploying a disaster action team, that comes kind of towards the end of our action. So what makes this deployment and activity different from working under the national response framework, if it's a larger incident, is the interagency communications, right? So if for instance, if we have a hurricane headed to Maui, we have time to do some pre-incident communications, and we have a lot of requests for that here in Maui County. And we can be asked to provide information about preparing to evacuate, what to take with you, precautionary information around public safety and health, what transportation is going to look like, what sheltering will look like for people and animals, household pets, right? So that can come in days ahead of the incident. And so very excited to have more of you coming on to be able to provide that information when requested. So in the first hour of an incident, we deploy our staff to the EOC, right? Here on island, I think on this call is one of our liaisons, Andy, right? Also Gordon Gillis and numerous other volunteers here on Maui that deploy to the EOC. So they're highly trained in public relations and working with government. At the same time, ESF 15 is activated. So that's external relations team that is at the EOC, right? Developing how they're going to communicate with the public around the emergency. And we support their communications, right? They, at any time they could come to us, since we're there in the room for information and or media presence. Oftentimes in the first hour, when we stand up a shelter, we are providing public relations around sheltering, where the shelters are, what you should be bringing, the best way to get there. And that's usually conducted by our EOC liaisons on site. But it doesn't have to be that way. I would love to have just a specific public relations person available at the EOC for those communications. So you see all the different things that we're doing and the timeline and how those things influence the communications that are being fed to different agencies at the EOC so that they can make the right briefings to the public or requests for our support. And those are supported by all sorts of daily briefing processes, including shelter counts and other action planning processes that go out throughout the DRO. When we get down to like recovery, which is maybe something you haven't talked a lot about yet, and we really have a lot of boots on the ground. We're doing damage assessments. We're out in the field. This is prime time for public relations because we can get great photographs of the damage, and we're talking to a lot of clients. So really, that would be the best time to have our folks out. It's also the time where we are communicating with both FEMA and MEMA regarding our work on damage assessments and what those numbers look like and what the damage looks like. This is also kind of around the time when we're requested to provide public information on disaster assistance and support services. You know, there can be a couple of days between when we open up shelters and when we can actually get on the ground and provide assistance to people in communities if we have transportation issues. So there, during that window, there's generally a lot of requests for when is the help coming, what should we expect, and so we do a lot of public relations work surrounding those issues around that time. So I just really wanted to highlight before I step away from this slide how the chain of command changes and how and kind of what we do when we don't communicate, right? So at the beginning of at the first hour, we're not out in the field communicating about the emergency at hand. Generally, we're doing that at the request of MEMA at the EOC. And that's just to make sure, as Matthew said, that we have the correct information, because that is the location for cooperation and communication sharing. I didn't add on this slide what our public relations response would be if it happened to be a mass casualty event. And in that case, it's my understanding that we all of those type situations will come down from national, and that those relations will go directly through Matthew. So we wouldn't be communicating at all about Red Cross, at least not out of Maui County. Maybe Matthew can clear that up. Our public relations volunteers would not be sharing any information about mass casualty events. I think that's all I have for slides. I want to, let me come back out of here. Did I stop share screen?
Yep.
I'm hoping I hit some of the points you were hoping for. Are there any questions for me?
Looks like we have, let's see. Oh, we have that answer. Thank you, Andy, for helping Karen out there in the chat about EOC, Emergency Operations Center. So thank you. Let's see. Anyone else? Okay. Well, I do want to at least open up this opportunity. If there are any questions or stories that you want to share about anything that you've heard this evening, please raise your hand, come off mute, or if you feel more comfortable that way, drop it into the chat. I am always, of course, looking to get people's firsthand experience so that we can share. I know that a lot of what gets done here with a lot of these training sessions and meetings is this is the way that the guidelines tell us to do it. And there can sometimes be yeah, but here's how it really needs to happen. So all of those firsthand experiences, I want to hear. I think there's something valuable in all of those. All right, from Karina, I was curious which media is preferred in the initial stages of a crisis: radio, TV, social. Okay. I hate to say this feels like a cop-out answer, but all of them. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to send out notifications of what's going on and the nature of the Red Cross response. If they are doing their job correctly, fingers crossed on that. If they're doing their job correctly, they are going to simply pick up what it is that you're telling them, because they were already going to start talking about it. Now that could be, say there's a multifamily fire. It could be that, hurricanes coming and we're opening shelters, whatever that might be. So in a sense, it's kind of up to them, but we're going to put it out to everyone. So the other caveat I want to put onto that is that the fastest of all of those is social, and it's the one that we control. So by default, taking those considerations into mind, social media is going to probably step out as the front runner. It is rather alarming how many people will go first to Twitter before going to any other form of quote unquote news sites. So since Twitter is both very valuable and horrifying noise, we have got to make sure that, again, we go back to that idea of providing value to whoever is coming by with these questions, or all of our followers that come to our page specifically so that they can get some verified, trusted information. Again, that also allows us to control the message, not just like this is the locations of the shelter. It's also going to be like, we are working to get to these neighborhoods, which we can't right now because of a landslide blocking the entrance and exits to the neighborhood, whatever that might be. It's just really to make sure that we are out in front of anything. And again, it's going to be because of those facts and transparency. So that is my long-winded answer to your question. I hope I answered it to your satisfaction. The greatest impact, along with social media, I would say, depending on the type of disaster, is going to be television. Television does that. However, the greatest number of people to be spoken to, well, considering we have it in every single piece of literature that we give out and train people on for preparedness, is to have a crank radio. Radio also has something that television does not. Now, that's whether you're talking about, well, let's just look at Hawaii, for example. If television is the case, I can talk to, KHON or KITV or Hawaii News Now. All of them are here on Oahu. If the emergency is happening on Maui or the Big Island or Kauai, it's not quite as powerful. There's a delay. In that sense, radio has this wonderful, wonderful way to be very hyper localized. And since we are training people to listen in and make sure they have a radio with them at all times in their emergency kit, that is going to be a very effective one as well. And especially if something happens where television gets knocked out. All right, so let's see. We have a couple of hands up. Karen, I see your hand up first. Did you have a question for us?
I have a couple of comments. One
Sure.
is I agree the radio, because when we had a disaster, a typhoon in Saipan, there was no electricity. There was no cell phones working. And same with Puerto Rico. The only thing they had was the local radio if they go sit in their car. And the media being as critical in the early parts, because, for example, they need to know what kind of shelter is opening. And they need to know whether it's an emergency or just evacuation or temporary, what they need to bring with them, their meds, what they do with their pets, all that is really critical in the early stages, because some people think they just go to the shelter and they weren't aware that it's only a one-night thing, and you need to bring your own blanket and bring your own pillow,
That's one of those things that definitely comes into the messaging and care of it. If people show up and they don't, I thought this was a full service hotel experience. Sorry, but we need to make sure that any of that misinformation, again, we get out in front of it and we just don't allow for it to grow. So thank you. Excellent comments. And you said you had another comment as well?
Well, I was just going to say that the radio in most big, large disasters, the radio is all they have. They
Very
can't.
True.
Cell phone towers are down. The power is down. Yeah. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Den, see you got your hand up.
Yes, actually, kind of. Karen touched on one thing that I have found is a common complaint is that people, they think a shelter is a shelter. And when it's just an evacuation shelter, they're saying, well, where are the cots? Where's the food? And all that kind of thing. Gets back to there again, communicating that so that people come and bring their stuff, because the worst thing is, most people are glad just to have a roof over their head, but that is critical with people in anywhere in the media or whatever. We need to get that out, that this isn't just an evacuation shelter. We are not providing food and blankets and cots and things like that. But the other thing that I haven't heard mentioning, because I'm a ham radio operator, I haven't used it for years, but we also know that, particularly when I was in American Samoa, we did not have any way to communicate except some cylinders that they banged. And when we had another tsunami warning, I had my ham radio operator. I had my ham radio with me, but they couldn't quite get it going. But have they kind of looked at having regular ham radio people kind of ready to go? Because there are a lot of ham radio people on all the islands. And have they ever thought of that as just another communication backup in case we lose everything, including
I can share
radio?
about that, Den.
Yeah.
So at the EOCs across the state, they have the ham radio teams present.
Yeah.
And they stand up their teams to support. In fact, we just participated in a ham radio activity in which our head of sheltering, Steve Shupak, was able to send them our shelter counts. That's the other thing that's great about the EOC and the participants in there, is having that communication method. We're really lucky here in Maui County that we have 7 radios. They're not ham radios, they're handheld radios. And we're able to communicate between the shelters, shelters to DPM and the EOC. And then beyond that to the state. So it proved to be incredibly useful. Just a few months after receiving them, we lost communications during the December event to our staffing person up in Kula. So we were able to, we've already really benefited by having these tools. But yeah, just to answer, yes, we, the ham radio operation clubs are super strong in the state, and they are present at the EOC.
Thank you much. Today I learned. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, if not, I want to just go through the reminders once again. Let everybody know. Pardon me. If you have, wow, I'm sorry. If you have any topics that you'd like to go over, please by all means reach out to me or to Kyoka. And our contact information is up there on the screen. Any future First Fridays that you think, hey, I would really like to know a little bit more about X, Y, and Z, we can start to tailor those. We want to make these as beneficial for our practical experience here in the Pacific Islands region as possible. If you would like to be a presenter, you feel you have a level of expertise on any of these subjects, we invite you to be one of our guest speakers. Thank you so much for that. And, oh, wow, I'll see you all on August 5th. I forgot to update that. I will see you all on October 7th for our next First Friday that will be centered on the wind down and the wrap up of communications and media relations, flow of information after a disaster response. All right, with that, I can give you all over to your weekend. Thank you for spending a Friday evening with us, and take care. Stay safe, and aloha.